All right, so let's talk nuclear energy. Let me set the stage. I put out a video on the German elections wherein I said some pretty mean stuff about the German Green Party and ascribed to them a hefty amount of blame for the German nuclear exit. And I got a lot of German pushback, a very fierce comment section. I originally was going to do a sort of crash out. You know, I've done this in the past where I like pull up a Reddit thread and I like try to like tear apart the points and I do a whole crash out. And then I remembered the last time I did that. It was around my Slowly All at Once video. Now I got a great clip out of it, but I also got a million more Reddit posts like that. All I did was give it so much attention that I encouraged it. It was like self-perpetuating. Also, I've said this year was the year of kindness. So what I'm going to do is try to approach this problem with kindness. I spoke to Aiden. Aiden watched my video, read the comments, and I asked Aiden as a neutral person to put together a list of questions he got from the comments that he would like me to answer. He said, I read all the comments, and the number one thing I'm asking for is why you are ascribing this to the Green Party over other parties. People are blaming the CDU. Can you go into that? So I want to do that. What I'm gonna do today, and again, I want to do a larger point. I want to do a larger here. Is like, I am a streamer. I go live with no script, and I tell information based on things that I've read and learned. But I'm doing it live. I don't write it down. I'm going it live, okay? If I made a mistake on something, I'm happy to hear it. However, in this case, I'm going to show you how I arrived at my conclusion. And I think when you see it, you may have a different opinion. I will walk you through all of the source data. I also spent a long time making sure that I have all of my sources. Usually I'm making these slides pretty quickly. I went through and I added the logos of where everything comes from. So if you would like to read this stuff yourself and learn about it, you can. I want you to do that, actually. I want you to take the conclusions that I'm drawing and look into them and challenge them. I really don't mind when someone disagrees with me. I really don't. This may shock you. It's a big internet. People are gonna have a million opinions. I know that I have a very narrow political belief. There's not many people that are like pretty strongly socially left-wing, but also support free markets, who also support unions, it's a very unique sphere that I find myself in. Many people will disagree with me. It's fine. What I don't like being told is that I didn't do my research. Before we go into it, and again, I read a lot of these comments, and I want to start with this. This is the narcissist prayer. The idea that, hey, something didn't happen, and if it did happen, it wasn't that bad. And if it was that bad, it wasn't my fault, it was someone else's fault. And if it was all that, well, then we all deserved it. Okay, maybe it was gonna go on. I want you to keep this narcissist prayer in mind. This is Germany, great country. I lived there for 4 years. This is nuclear power. I'm gonna give you a brief overview of why I like nuclear power, because people have asked that. Why is Atrox so pro-nuclear? Nuclear power has a very high capacity rate. This means percentage of time that it's online. When you're running nuclear power, 92.5% of the time, except for down for maintenance, it's making power. It's generating stable baseload power. Wind and solar are also great sources of power, but they are less stable. They're intermittent. When the wind is not blowing or when the sun is not shining, they're offline. So they're good ancillary sources of power, but as stable baseload sources of power, they have problems. These coal and hydropower and natural gas, well, they're pretty good, except when you look at carbon footprint. So I also believe in climate change. I think climate change is a real thing and it's man-made, and that we should try to do our best to have clean energy. Nuclear is the lowest carbon emissions of any source. So it has the highest capacity rate and the lowest emissions. Coal has many times more. I'm gonna say this early. It would be crazy to want to stop producing nuclear and produce more coal. Any situation in which you found yourself turning on coal plants after you turned off nuclear plants, you have to really question what the f is going on. At the same time, there's a larger thing that I don't believe in. This is just true. The world's demand for energy grows every year. It is an up and to the right graph from the dawn of time, except for maybe the Black Plague. We are always demanding more energy. As society grows, as we digitize more, as we get electric vehicles, the demand for electricity continues to grow. You always need more power. And so finding ways to create that power that is also clean is very important. There are no countries in the world who are high income and low energy. If you want your country to be rich and to have good things for your citizens, you are going to be a high energy country. As you move the energy ladder, you move the income ladder. Energy is life. So again, you have to find a way to grow your country. If you start skimping on energy or your energy becomes more expensive, it's very bad for your country. You start falling down the income ladder very quickly. These are all things that are like Stable to the noise. Now, with all that boring stuff out of the way, let's take ourselves to 1980s Germany. The style was different. The fashion was different. Times were good. We're in the 80s, baby. We got big wild hair. There's good music on. And we're in Germany. Things are good. Jeans, t-shirt, Beach Boys. Things are good. And in Germany, things are looking extra pretty good because, and the Berlin Wall's about to fall, and Germany is a nuclear superpower. Germany has become, over the course of the 70s and 80s, a massive nuclear energy power. They've built a ton of nuclear power plants. It's producing a huge mix, I think about a fourth or a fifth of all of their energy, 22 gigawatts, it's a billion watts, of the world's best run nuclear reactors. Germany was once capable of churning out 170 terawatt hours per year of carbon-free baseload power, an enviable anchor that served as one of their two economic foundations of its impressive manufacturing sector. This is a big deal. Now again, a gigawatt is 3.125 million solar panels, and there was 22 of them in nuclear. So 3 million times 22, that's how many solar panels they had of stable baseload carbon-free nuclear power. Germany loved their nuclear. It was doing very well. They had an extremely powerful homegrown, they were some of the best in the world at it. In fact, at the time, there was a Simpsons episode where Germany was so associated with their strong nuclear energy sector that Mr. Burns sells the plant to the Germans.
Mr. Burns, we've heard that a German consortium has offered to purchase the plant. You'll see the Statue of Liberty wearing lederhosen before you see Germans running my plant.
By the way, the episode ends with Homer doing such a bad job as the Germans sell the plant. So that was in the media. Like the media had a picture of Germans as being pro-nuclear, having a big nuclear industry. Around the same time, there was a rising environmentalist movement, there was student protests, and a party emerged called Die Grünen, the Green Party. This is where the Green Party emerged, late 70s, early 80s. They were kind of like hippies of the time. They showed up, they wore sneakers, they had beards, they didn't wear suits. They were in the Bundestag, which is the parliament of Germany. By the way, I think being hippie's cool. I think they were anti-war, they wanted peace, it was all great. You'd think that a pro-environmentalist Green Party that's anti-war and all that would have certain beliefs, right? So let's say there's a spectrum like this, where on the left, you hate nuclear energy, and on the right, you say nuclear power, yes, please. Where would you think the Green Party would fall on this spectrum? Would they be nuclear power, yes, please, or would they be anti? The Green Party in Germany specifically falls here. The Green Party in Germany specifically, birthed in this time in the 70s and 80s, is extremely, extremely anti-nuclear. This student movement, because of the time and the era and fears over nuclear power, this is pre-Chernobyl, by the way. This isn't even after Chernobyl. This is pre-Chernobyl. The Green Party in Germany has a fusion of the environmentalist movement and the anti-nuclear movement. This is gonna have effects over the next few decades. This fusion of these two movements, anti-nuclear, by the way, the Green Party is formed out of anti-nuclear protests in front of the nuclear factory in Will, Germany. This is all confirmed. Feel free to check my sources, okay? Look into it. It traces its origins to student protest movements. The focus of the movements were protests against nuclear power. Then they get into power in the 83. They get their first 5% lead to get into parliament. Now, they're not a big party. They don't have a lot of power, but they can make a shakeup. So they get into federal parliament and they start bringing their staunchly anti-nuclear position into parliamentary debates. And they start pressuring the two big parties, we'll talk about them a lot later, the CDU and the SDP, conservative and liberal, like kind of standard left-right in America. The CDU and the SDP, they get pressured by the Greens to be more anti-nuclear. That's what's happening, okay? But they don't have any power. Like, they're not making any choices. They're 5%. They need a window. They need a chance to really get their mission across. Nobody's listening to them. Nobody's shutting down the nuclear. In 1998, a window opens in 1998. The Greens do really well in that election. And a certain guy appears, okay? This guy, Gerhard Schroeder, is their window. He is the head of the SDP, and he teams up with the Greens to form their first coalition. So it's the Red-Green Alliance that gets over 50% of the vote and now can control government. SDP and the Greens team up for their first coalition. This is the first time the Green Party has ever been in German government. The first time they actually have a voice and a chance to do something. What do they do with this newfound power? Now that they're friends with Gerhard Schroeder, they decide they're gonna finally take down nuclear energy. This 22 gigawatts of power is terrible. They make nuclear energy phase out their highest priority and succeed in passing a law Now, I want to point out a specific part here. They succeed in passing it over considerable opposition from the CDU and the FDP and the energy utilities in 2000. This is 2001. This is when I lived in Germany as a child. This is the red-green coalition over opposition succeeds in forcing it out. This is the article from the time in German, 2002, when they shut it down. Now, there's something unique here. Now, obviously, the Green Party was anti-nuclear from the beginning. But why was Gerhard Schroeder? Why was the SDP guy against nuclear? What did he have to gain from it? Well, it turns out he was a Putin asset. He was paid $1 million a year by Russian-controlled energy companies, and after he left the chancellorship, he went and worked for Gazprom in Russia. So he was an open traitor who wanted to get off nuclear so that Germany would be more dependent on Russian natural gas. He was a total asset. The Green Party were willful idiots. They'll help them along. I don't believe they were corrupted. I don't think they were part of the Russian, I don't think they were paid off. I agree with this Reddit comment. The anti-nuclear movements, German or otherwise, were more useful idiots than active agents. I believe they helped him get a really stupid anti-German policy passed. And he was very happy. Putin's pal Gerhard Schroeder laughed all the way to the bank. He got to leave Germany in a worse state than he found it and make a ton of money. The troubled red-green legacy. This is at the end of at 2005, finally people voted him out. 7 years after they came into power, the Social Democrats and the Greens are on a brink of collapse amid rising unemployment rates and reforms that have been proven unpopular with wide swaths of the population. This is from Dino, you can go check it out. So the nuclear exit started with a traitor and the Greens. I just want you to understand that. That's where this whole policy began with. Then in 2005, enter Angela Merkel. This is Angela Merkel of the CDU. Now, if you were to read the comments on my video, you'll see 1 million posts saying, wow, you should blame the CDU for this. The Greens had nothing to do with this. The CDU shut down nuclear. And I wanted to look into this. I wanted to understand. Again, I don't have a bias here. I don't care. If it was her fault, I'll blame her. But I want to look into it. I want to make sure that I'm not being led astray by a college kid in Germany who thinks they know everything about their country because they live there. I wanted to see what happened with Angela Merkel. So Angela Merkel, until now, I've had a positive opinion of. When her and Obama were in power, it was the closest Germany and America have ever been politically. They worked together on a lot of things. Angela Merkel is also a scientist. So she has a pro-science standpoint. I found her and her positions, if I didn't agree with them, again, I don't agree with their stance on abortion and a couple things, but they at least were founded in some science, okay? They had some measurement. And during her time, German unemployment did drop and manufacturing output increased and Germany was the leader of EU. Now, there's things I disagree with. I'm not gonna glaze Angela Merkel here. I just want to understand going in that I have a generally positive opinion of her background for being the first female leader of Germany having a science background. Now, based on my comments, you would think she came in with a wrecking ball and started shutting down nuclear plants. But actually, she comes in and says, I will consider it absurd to shut down technologically safe nuclear power plants that don't emit CO2. 2006, right after she comes into office. Then she starts saying, we need to stop this stupid rule written by the Greens and Schroeder. This idea that we have to shut down all of our nuclear by 2022 is silly. Let's reverse that. In 2010, she risks Germans' ire with a fresh commitment to nuclear energy. She adds 15 years to the phase out. Let's keep these plants going. Interesting. Based on my comments, you would think she immediately wanted to shut these down. She tours all 17 of the remaining plants and says it's unrealistic to shut them down if we want to meet our environmental goals, which is true. We already know what happens. Deadly emissions spiked. CO2 way up. Okay, we know that happens. So she toured it. She found a scientific reason to not shut them down and didn't shut them down. Well, when she said this, all hell broke loose. The Green Party started putting up papier-mâché dolls of Angela Merkel and parading around Germany saying she was trying to kill the country. They have a thing of her playing atomic poker with everyone's lives. They're wearing masks, carrying signs. 100,000 Germans in a protest organized by the Green Party surrounded Angela Merkel's office in a nuclear protest. This is in 2010. That's an important date. Surrounded her office and said, you cannot extend the lifespan of our nuclear energy. You're killing us. You have to close down these nuclear powers. Again, they are not opposed to nuclear for cost reasons or for CO2 reasons. They are opposed to it for fear-based ideological reasons. Okay, there's a big ideological, fear-based, fear-mongering movement. Angela Merkel, despite this protest, does not change her mind. She does not change her mind. She says, no, we're still gonna extend the lifespan of these nuclear power plants. And then something happens. An earthquake off the coast of Japan, causes a tsunami that hits Japan's largest nuclear power plant, Fukushima. When this happens, it changes the course of Germany forever. Headlines are everywhere about this crazy nuclear disaster. Even though nobody dies in it, by the way, it's chaos. It's proof for everybody in these protests that nuclear really is too dangerous. You can't have it in case an earthquake hits a tsunami, hits your plant. So there's a disaster. Merkel realizes this is going to be bad for her. And immediately it is. Germany's Green Party gets their biggest win yet. They start winning over her party in all these different elections, all these different states. Even places that are traditionally CDU start suddenly seeing huge surge of support for the Greens. This is after the protest, by the way. They seem like they were right. Because of this, Merkel is unfortunately forced by the voters. They will vote her and her whole party out of existence unless she changes her mind. She's made fun of for it. They call it her Waterloo. Her anti-nuclear opponents claim victory at forcing her to change her mind. She has to go back to the original plan and in fact accelerate it to keep shutting down nuclear, which she does. She goes back to Schroeder's plan, accelerates it. They start shutting down nuclear power plants. Again, I'll show you where we are on this chart. Here, start seeing massive 10, 15 gigawatt drops in nuclear power output. This is replaced by mostly coal. Is this something I agree with that her doing? No, but I at least understand. She's responding to the will of the voters. I get that. Even on her exit though, by the time she finally leaves office in 2021, she says, the nuclear phase out will make it harder to reduce emissions. Yes, I had to do it. I still don't agree with it. Please don't continue it. It'll make it harder to reduce emissions. She says this herself as she leaves office. All it's done is made us more reliant on coal and natural gas. And she hands a new coalition, the traffic light coalition of the SDP, the Greens, and the FDP, the reins. They have now won in 2021. They're gonna take Germany over. And when she hands the power to them, still 14% of the country is on nuclear power. They still have 6 big reactors that are producing clean, CO2-free energy at a high rate. Stable baseload power. 14% of the country, still more than solar. Solar and hydropower combined, okay? That's when these two guys come into power. This is Olaf Scholz of the SDP and Robert Habeck of the Greens. Now, I've mentioned in the video that I didn't like Robert Habeck. And this is, again, I'm gonna explain to you why. I followed his actions and I made my conclusion. The first thing Robert Habeck leads upon getting into power is to pull the plug on 3 of its last 6 plants immediately, instantly, rushes it through. Like within 2 or 3 months from going into power, rushes it through. Okay, fine. The immediate response in all of these situations is always more coal. They have to use more stable baseload power. They are growing their wind and solar, don't get me wrong, but wind and solar growth is largely coming at the expense of nuclear. Again, you see coal is basically flat. It's just nuclear shrinking and they're replacing most of that with wind and solar. So it's not like they're getting massively cleaner. It's slightly cleaner because they're getting more than the nuclear was, but it's mostly just instead of coal plus nuclear, it's coal plus wind. You could have kept nuclear and replaced the coal with the wind. Do you understand how obvious that would be? So anyway, they shut down 3 and they're continuing the slow phase out plan to shut down the last 3 and just be done with nuclear. That's the goal of Robert Habeck and the Greens. And then something unexpected happens again. Russia invades Ukraine. And now this is a problem because one of the main sources of cheap, stable energy that Germany has relied upon, especially as they shut down nuclear, is Russian natural gas. They import it very cheaply and they use that to power their industry. And it's been successful. Germany's industry has grown to be very strong. They're an exporting nation. Well, after the war, everyone's like, all right, well, we have to sanction Russia. We can't buy natural gas anymore. This guy, Olaf Scholz, goes, well, come on, we need it. We need it. We have to buy it. And so you may not remember this, but for the beginning of the war, Germany is sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Russia as they are fighting them. They are literally defending the action of buying natural gas constantly while trying to fight Russia. They're literally funding the war effort against them. Obviously, this doesn't make sense, is not strategically aligned with NATO's goals. Then somebody blows up the Nord Stream pipeline. Now, nobody knows who, but I have my theories.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
He was talking about ending the Nord Stream pipeline. Anyway, after saying this, mysteriously, the Nord Stream pipeline explodes. Now suddenly Germany can no longer buy natural gas from Russia. Russia's no longer getting this easy funding. Coincidence or not, I'll never know, right? I'm a streamer, but it's definitely helpful to Biden and NATO's cause. That's where one of my main sources for the ideas that I have, this book Kaput by a German, Wolfgang Munchau. He's a writer for the Financial Times. He voted for the traffic light coalition of these guys, but his book is pretty damning on their actions, both in and around the war. So I'm gonna read you a passage here from this book, okay? In September 2022, the Nord Stream pipelines were blown up. This ended Scholz's delusion that Germany could continue relying on Russian gas while supporting Ukraine in the war. Around the same time, the coalition of the Reds and the Greens had its first big disagreement over the future of the 3 remaining nuclear power stations, which were due to go offline. Robert Habeck, this guy, the Greens economic minister, insisted that the coalition should stick to the agreed timetable and shut them down. Nuclear power had a totemic quality for the Greens, as we have seen since the party's very existence sprang from anti-nuclear protest movements. Now they were in charge of the economics ministry for the first time ever. There is no way they would let go of capturing the big prize, shutting down the final 6 stations. Okay, interesting. That's what they do. Now I want you to point out something. Do you guys remember how when Angela Merkel was against shutting them down, but submitted to the will of the voters? People were saying they wanted it, fine, she had to do it. When Robert Habeck shut down the final 3 plants, not only were partners of his coalition against it, 2/3 of Germans were against it. He ignored the will of the voters, he ignored the will of the other people in his coalition, and he led the shutdown of the last 3 plants. This had many private and external costs. Again, this is a study you can look at from the Journal of the European Economic Association. We find the reductions in nuclear electricity production were offset primarily by increases in coal-fired production and more imports. The social costs are of 3 to 8 billion euros per year. Shutting down the world's most modern and safest nuclear power plants in Germany is a dramatic mistake that will have painful economic and ecological consequences. This is from the FDP. They are in coalition with him. He's saying this, the voters are saying this. You know the only voters that are not saying this? There's only one party in all of Germany whose voters supported shutting it down during the war. This guy, the Green Party. And only 56% of them, 44% didn't want to shut him down. So only a slight majority of a small party wanted to shut it down. And Robert Habeck, because he was economics minister, forced it through. That is why I do not trust him. That is why I am against. I find it to be extremely foolish. Again, but Robert Habeck said it won't affect energy security. And yet it did and has. Additionally, now that it's been enough time, now that we've had 50 years from the beginning of this saga to the end to see the effects, you can look back and find that if Germany had just done what France did in the early 2000s and continued building nuclear, it would have cost dramatically less than this massive surge of trying to push wind and coal and helped meet their climate goals. And I want you to really understand this. I want you to understand that why I can so easily feel solid in this belief is that every day you can go check the European electricity map. I'll give you the link. It's ienergy.info. You can check this every day, any hour. And you can look at the countries in Europe who tried nuclear and the countries in Europe who didn't. You can see that Germany, despite talking such a big game about environmentalism, has never been greener than France. Never even been close. They are less energy secure and more pollutant than France. And now we find ourselves in a spot where when the wind doesn't blow, it's called a Dunkelflaut. When the wind doesn't blow or when the sun doesn't shine, German electricity prices skyrocket and they have to import coal from Poland, coal energy from Poland, hydro and nuclear from the north in Sweden and Norway, and nuclear from the west, from France. This is where they find themselves. It's a Dunkelflaut. It is very funny. It is a bad situation to find yourselves. I can go a million, and it's crazy because to be so anti-nuclear and then to have 56 nuclear plants on your border, many of these French plants are right here. It's not like the radiation won't affect you if there's a meltdown. At the same time, I made a big claim in my video that these policies have pushed people towards the far right. Again, I don't know how I could have been clear, but I'll be very clear right now. F the AFD. The AFD is a terrible party that will lead Germany to ruin. But the reason they exist, people like to blame like, oh, it just happens to us. This just happens out of nowhere. No, it is the result of people's lives getting worse. Stupid policies, short-sighted effort, corrupt politicians, all of this combines to make people's lives worse, and then they are pushed to the far right. If you can't acknowledge your mistakes, if we can't get competent, scientific, realistic leaders, then you're gonna get these problems. So there's a good article in the New York Times, how Germany's Greens lost their luster. The party was riding high when it entered the government. 2 years into their term, it is stumbling. Blame for driving voters to the far right. Another big claim I make in the video is that three-party coalitions in Germany have a tough time getting along, getting anything done. Or one of the reasons people have that perception in Germany is how the tricolor traffic light coalition exploded. And one of the main reasons it exploded and couldn't get anything done is because this heat pump law that Robert Habeck invented and tried to force through. Robert Habeck had a law which required people, here I wrote the whole thing down. In the summer of 2023, Habeck launched the biggest green project of his legislature, the domestic heating bill, which is a law that forced households to change their heating systems from gas and oil heaters to expensive electric pumps. For many homeowners, especially those living in poor neighborhoods, the cost of the change would be out of proportion to the value of their homes. Whether you agree with it or not, here's what you cannot deny. The domestic heating bill was a disaster for the coalition, politically destroyed them, and for the Green Party in particular. Housing prices started collapsing. The heating bill was eventually watered down, but the political damage persisted. Now, the government partners had fought before, but it was the heating bill controversy that revealed deep fissures running through the coalition. It was the beginning of the anti-green backlash. This was used, this stupid idea. Again, if this were to even pass, it would have such a minor effect, but forcing people to do expensive heating pump changes when you shut down nuclear power plants, when Germany is already not green, is insane. And it caused people to, first of all, the party not be able to get anything done, to blow up the coalition, and to drive people into the hands of the far right. The heat hammer, Boilergeddon. It cast a long shadow over German politics. It was communicated so poorly and backfired so spectacularly that it helped turbocharge the far right. From zero to hero, Germany's Robert Habeck picks up the climate tab. Energy policy backlash has put him and his Greens down and the far right up. At one point, 1 in 2 Germans wanted him to resign. 1 in 2, okay? Now, this is from Wolfgang Munchau, who wrote this book, who talks about disagreeing with their push to take down nuclear energy. When the coalition came to power in late 2021, nuclear accounted for 14% of the electricity. At that point, they should have turned the plants back on after Putin invaded Ukraine. Nuclear wouldn't have solved all of Germany's problems, but it would have made a difference. The outgoing government was, and again, he was supportive of this party, was the first genuinely green government in Europe. In no other country did Greens have this position of power. Now, red-green stands for failure in Germany. That is something we have to reflect on very deeply. And I don't see people reflecting on this. I see people acting like the voters are so stupid. They had no idea. All these dumb voters have no idea that their lives are getting worse or things are getting harder or they're asked to shoulder the burden for bad energy policy when they go over. Maybe you should look in the mirror. Maybe you need to accept some blame, some responsibility for what you do when you have power. By the way, my final thing, what about the other country involved in Fukushima? What about Japan? How did they respond to the disaster in their country? You'd think it would hit more close to home. Japan loves nuclear. To this day, they are the fastest and best builders of nuclear power plants because it gives them energy security for their island nation. In fact, while I was researching this whole thing, I found an article in the Japan Times where they said it's time for Germany to admit its mistake on nuclear energy. At the same time, one of the big problems in Germany, I talk about this in the video as well, and this is a big mistake, or a lack of foresight by all parties in Germany, but Angela Merkel as well. A lack of foresight that, hey, one day China's gonna catch up. Right now, we sell all this stuff to China. One day they'll make it themselves. Nobody talked about that. Nobody recognized that. It's a big problem. Well, now, not only is China lapping Germany in manufacturing, but they are building like 14 nuclear power plants right now. And they're leading in the technology. They're like one of the leaders in it. Now they're building a huge fusion research facility. This is what the compounding effects of 50 years of backwards energy policy is. Now the leaders countries are China. You know who's leading in nuclear research in Europe? It's France. A day after China built an artificial sun in a research lab, France built one that was 25% better. That's awesome. Imagine being a French citizen and having pride in this awesome forethought policy that keeps you at a technological forefront, that helps have your energy be cleaner and better and safer and planned for the future. This is sick for France. This is what you want. A party that is both green and anti-nuclear is not really green. That's my point, and I stand by it, okay? Now, South Korea is building a ton of nuclear power plants. Again, these other countries are building for the future. It's popular. There is one outlier that has shut down their own nuclear power plants. Sweden tried it. Now, there's one other country. Sweden had a green party get into power and try to shut down their own nuclear, and they stopped it. They stopped it halfway before it was halfway all shut down, and turned it around and started building more. And Sweden nowadays is so mad at Germany for shutting theirs down because it drives up nuclear prices energy prices in Sweden. And still, I'll find comments that link up with this article where people are just smug about their energy errors. I want you to go back to the narcissist prayer. And if you read some of these comments, they basically follow this logic. It wasn't our fault. And if it was, it wasn't a big deal. And if it was a big deal, it would have happened anyway. And if it would have happened anyway, it's already over, nothing can be done about it. It's crazy. I don't buy it. They will use any type of bullshit they can use. They'll pull any number out of their ass to try and pretend that they can't do what every other country is doing. It's 100% possible. By the way, I also want to dispute the notion that there are Germans that don't agree with this. There are many Germans who agree with what I'm saying. You can find them online. They're all over the place. You can pull up a Robert Habeck clip and see the 10 top comments in German being like, this guy sucks. We did it. Me and Dom just did it. We were translating Robert Habeck clips. This is great. German ecologists when they see the CO2 emissions of the French electric grid. Wait. Again, this is a German. This is on like the R Europe subreddit. A German saying the Greens would rather have 10,000 Germans die than cancel the nuclear exit. This guy's not even a fucking fan of the FDP either. And finally, perhaps it's worth wondering why the party did so badly in this last election, such that Robert Habeck 2 days ago just resigned. This guy was next up to be German chancellor in 2021. And is now resigned. So I want to say this is the conclusion. That's what I followed. I didn't make this up out of whole cloth, dude. I read these stories every day. I read this book. I talked to Germans. I also talked to the son of Germany's largest trucking company's CEO. He's an Atriarch viewer. He sent me proof of who his dad is, then asked his dad questions that I asked. I have done my research. By the way, I don't agree with that guy on everything. That guy has some bad stances on inheritance tax because he's a rich guy. I don't care if you disagree. I really don't. It's fine if you disagree. What does it matter? We're not changing the world here. We're not influencing votes. It's a YouTube channel. But I don't like being told that I didn't do my research, bro. I did my research and I came to my conclusion. If you have a problem with these sources, feel free to bring it up. If you have a different take on my interpretation of these truths, that's fine. But I came to this conclusion through effort, okay? I'm talking my facts, and that's why I want to make this case. This is all ancillary stuff. A strong consensus outside of Green Party circles that Germany's nuclear phase-out was counterproduction. It increased carbon emissions, raised energy costs, and provided minimal safety or environmental benefit in return. Shunning nuclear power has been a grave error. Talks about other countries. Yeah, we're good. You got my point. I have a lot of extra stuff here. I don't need it. I made my point. Now, I do want to say one thing. There was one major error in my presentation. I don't think it's a big deal to the point I was making, but it's a major error. I said that, it came from a joke. I was talking to a German as I was making that presentation. And this German guy, we were talking about, dude, there's so many parties in Germany. He's like, yeah, well, it's because we had one party for 10 years. And he like did a wink. And it was because he was talking about the Nazis. He was saying the Nazis for 10 years, that's why we have and so I was trying to make that joke, but it sounded more authoritative. I am well aware the German Parliament existed prior to the Nazis. I know how they came to power, okay? But the way I watched the clip again, and I'm like, yeah, I said that wrong. I said it basically like they invented the parliament after the Nazis. That's not what happened, obviously. They changed some things. They got rid of the president, so you couldn't appoint the chancellor and they had to earn one with votes, but I did flub that, 100%. So I want to apologize. That is a mistake in the thing. I am going live with no script. I'm going to misspeak. There was another comment that was like, I can't trust this guy. He said the left got 7% of the vote. Where the is that coming from? I said they got 7%. They actually got 8.77. By the way, I showed this map with this number on screen during the presentation. I'm sorry I said 7%. I meant 8.77. It didn't change the result of what I was saying, but I guess fake news. So again, I'm not trying to crash out here. And I understand, again, I understand that my circle of beliefs is not shared by everyone. I get you can have different opinions. And I also, someone advised me this. So we showed this presentation to a German. It was Dom, one of our researchers' mom. She lives in a small town in Germany. She voted CDU, but hear her out. She watched the presentation, she loved it. But she said this. She said, when you're explaining this, you have to understand there are some young people in Germany who vote for the Greens because of reasons only like abortion or social reasons. They vote for social reasons. And so if you tell them this, you have to be kind because they'll get emotional, they'll get mad. And I know that I've done that. I don't know how to approach these things without triggering people. And it's a fault of mine. And I apologize. I'm not trying to fire you up, but I'm not going to change my mind unless I see hard evidence that this is important. And I sincerely, and I get some other takes, it's part of the narcissist prayer. People are like, well, it's not even a big deal. It doesn't even matter. It is a big deal. It does matter. A Germany that had been powerful and into nuclear from the beginning would be such a different place right now. It would be so much more economically secure. They would have less deindustrialization. They wouldn't have so many plants shutting down. They would have energy security from the Russians. It would be better. And again, I looked up the policies of all these platforms before I made that presentation. And I probably could have been nicer. I have a lot of left-leaning viewers, okay? Actually, I have a lot of young people. So I have comments that were like, yeah, I agree with the other comments. You're a champagne socialist. You should realize the AFD is great. And then I have comments being like, you're a far-right shill. I have comments accusing me of both platforms. Just to have a young, passionate Germans in my audience who are in one of these two parties probably that are like demanding radical change for their, it's not a popular vision to be like, hey, I know the centrist party is not popular, but it's probably the only hope of like Germany's normalcy without a big radical change that we don't know how it'll play out, okay? I understand that. I could have said some nicer things about the left, the Linke. I really like their policy on antitrust. I like that woman. I forget her name, but she's been super active on social media. She built up their positivity. However, the big surge in the left voters that got them to 8.77 is actually largely from German Greens fleeing the platform. I saw a chart showing where voters went. It's a lot of Greens flipping over. They have the exact same stance on nuclear. So I have to just admit, like, it's hard for me to get behind it when you still have the same stance, where it's still like nuclear is anti-environment. It's vexing. So again, this is my logic. This is my thought process. No, that's false info? Really? Because I looked up this page on their website about atomic energy and I Google Translate it, so I could be wrong, but it talks about being against nuclear energy. So that's where I stand. Okay? I hope that made at least my thought process clear. I love and respect my German brothers and sisters, even if they disagree on that. Okay? I lived in Germany 4 years. I love the country. I love the food. I love the bread. I love the Brötchen. But that's where I stand. This is a larger crash out I'm having with politicians that somewhat share my ideals globally. Because if you share my ideals, but you make people's lives worse, or you have stupid policy, outside of that, then actually you don't share my ideals. You are hurting them. You are driving people away from the things I support. You are losing us voters. This is something I deeply believe. So that's why I get angry at parties like this around the world, including in my own country. People mad about with lack of explanation when nobody was for the AFD. So I'll answer this too. A Spectacor gave me some insight on this. He said, I know where you stand on things, but sometimes it's nice just for you to say it. And I realize there's some people that just want me to say, Nazis bad. I feel like it's stupid to say. It's like obvious. It feels like I'm begging for W's or Drakes. It feels lame. But people, when you don't say it, they're like, oh my, I can't figure it out. I don't understand where he stands. So I'll tell you, Nazis bad. Of course. I hate the idea that people will see voters who previously didn't vote for this party shifting that way and be like, well, there's nothing we could do. This isn't our fault and there's nothing we could do. It's like, okay, bro, let's take a look in the mirror. Let's figure it out. What I don't understand is nuclear policy can't be the only factor driving certain balances. Super energy costs are the only thing that, no, of course not. Of course not. There's plenty more things. The main two things though, in this election were immigration, which I talked about. It's become a huge, it's like same as America. It was immigration and the economy largely based around rising energy costs, deindustrialization. Okay, immigration and the economy. Same thing as here, same thing as Germany. I spoke about both. I voted Green entirely on social issues. I'm trans and disabled. Any social issues outweighs economics for me. I know people like this. 100%, I am supportive of you. If you think I have any problem with that, then you haven't watched my content, bro. I am pro trans rights. If you think that's your best fucking avenue in the country, then vote for it. But I would be mad at the Green Party for hurting my chances of getting in power by doing stupid energy policy and driving voters away. I would be mad at them. Do you understand? That's what I'm saying. When Trudeau gets half of Canada chanting "F Trudeau," but he is like pro women's rights, he's hurting those policies. He's driving voters because most people vote on economics. They vote on their pocketbook, their inflation. If you are hurting that part of them, they'll go anywhere. So that's my whole philosophy. That's my stance. Anyway, I think I've made myself clear. I think if people watch this today, they'll have a good idea of where I stand. And I'm glad this clip will exist. But I don't think I need to say any more. As a Floridian, I laughed and learned. Thank you, GOAT. Hey, thanks, bro. When I make these presentations, my main goal is that I think there's some American who doesn't follow any of this shit out there who might like to learn a little bit more. I understand that people in other countries watch me, but mostly it's Americans. There's some American, probably a gamer, probably younger, probably male. Not always, but that's my fucking demographics. And maybe they don't follow any of this shit, and it's nice to know a little bit more about the world. That's my target. So when you tell me, oh, I'm a German, you didn't tell about the 1964 accord between this party and this party. It's like, okay, bro, I know about this, by the way. I read about it, but I'm not including it because I'm trying to keep it entertaining and snappy for an audience that doesn't know about any of this. When I get crashed out on by people that I don't think have even read what I've read, but throw this "I'm a German" thing at me. By the way, I was in Germany for half of this stuff happening. I was in Germany from 98 to 2002 when they started shutting down nuclear. I'm the one that shut it down. I was a kid. I was 12 years old and I started shutting the nuclear down. Is it true that Dan Clancy bought all the power plants Germany shut down to power us megatropolis? I can't confirm or deny this, but it sounds like old Clancy. It sounds like right up his alley. I wouldn't have put it past Clancy to bribe the German Greens to be anti-nuclear so that he could buy their power plants on the cheap.